大
嗯
家好，非常感谢你让我跟你们分享一下。那你看到我的脸，可能听到我跟你们讲一点中文，就会觉得怎么会这样子？那我之前也是有7年住在台湾，那所以我也了解当你在一个别的国家的时候，很多东西要去了解。那我知道，呃，观察的人有的是从国外来的，有的是本地美国人，所以我希望我今天晚上能够给你一些讯息，是能够帮助你，特别是在这个话题上面。因为我自己也是一个爸爸，那我知道家长做一个选择，就是对小孩子的教育的选择是非常的重要。那接下来要讲的，对我来讲，如果要用中文的话，我可能会有一点紧张，所以我今天晚上要用英文跟你们讲。那希望我讲的会清楚。那等一下如果有任何的问题，我讲完之后，我会给你一个问问题的时间。好，所以现在用英文。So tonight we're going to talk about um, public school, private school, homeschool, online school. There's a lot of choices in America that you could choose for your child. So, like Vicky said, a lot of people after COVID have been choosing something different for their kids, but it's important to not just leave something but enter into something that's good for your child. And I know that's important to you. It's important to me. I've got 3 kids. I've got one that's 21. I've got one that's 18. He's a senior this year. And then I have an 8-year-old. And so choosing our kids' education is so important. And so tonight, what I want to do is talk about some of the issues, also talk about some of the choices, the advantages and disadvantages, and then also give you some examples that you can think about, and then hopefully answer some questions for you. So we'll jump right in. Now, I know that Vicky did this school choice polling，所以江主任之前做一个择校权法案的调查，and this is the results of that polling. So her group, which is you guys, 79% of you agree that there should be school choice in America. And I think 14% disagree, 4% aren't sure, and 4% don't really understand it. So we'll talk about some of this. But it's interesting that almost 80% of you feel like there should be choice when it comes to your children's education. And I agree. I think school choice is great because it puts the power of deciding what type of education your child gets in your hands versus in our government's hands. And I think that's a positive thing. That's my personal opinion. And we'll talk about some of those reasons tonight. But across America, about 72%, almost 72% of all of America agrees with this. About 72% of America supports school choice. They want school choice. They want options for their kids. And it's becoming more available. So for those of you that live in states that have it, I congratulate you. That's incredible. For those of us that don't, we keep voting for it and pushing our congressmen to hopefully get it. But we'll talk about some of those issues in just a little bit. So I want to share with you a little bit about my background real fast. I currently live in Texas, but I'm the superintendent of a school system, and we have 2 main brands. The first one is Southlands Christian Schools, and we have a preschool, and then we also have a K-12 school in Southern California. So that's in Roland Heights, Walnut, Diamond Bar area, if you're familiar with Southern California. If you live there, come see us. We'd love to host you on the campus. We'd love to have you out, give you a tour, let you see what we're doing. We have a lot of different programs for kids. We've got full-time programs. We've got summer programs, short-term programs, a lot of different programs there at the school. So we'd love to have you visit and just come see what's going on. And then Vicky just mentioned too, Pathway Christian Prep is based in Texas, but it's an online school. And so we have an online school as well as a hybrid school that works with churches to develop smaller school opportunities for kids. And then we also have a homeschool program where we have curriculum and a whole sort of homeschool model. So we have a lot of choices in our school model, and we do that because no 2 kids are the same, And so students need options, parents need options to make sure their student gets the right schooling for them. So we have a lot of different options that we give families, and we want to kind of talk through some of those things today as you think about this. So just thinking about what are top priorities for parents. What's important to you? As you choose, if you choose to exit the public school or stay in it, everybody's different. So I'm not here to tell you what the right choice is for you. I'm just here to share with you some things that you should think about. And so for me, and when we look at the research in education, the absolute top priority, research-based data shows in America, safety and security is number one for parents, and it should be. Safety and security of your child should be one of the very first things that you think about. Now, unfortunately, America's schools are not always the safest places for our kids, right? And so we want to make sure that we put our kids in a safe environment. And that now today, it doesn't just mean physically, although that is important. On our campus in California, well, first let me say, in Texas, they actually have a law in Texas now that's new, that every school site has to have an armed security guard on it. And that's because we've had a lot of issues in the past in America with things happening at schools. So they have an armed security guard. In California, where our primary campus is, that's not the law. However, our school does employ security. We also employ armed security because we want to keep our families safe. We want to make sure our kids can not worry about safety. Parents can have a safe place to go, drop their kids, and they can just know that they're going to be taken care of and they're going to be learning and not have to worry about all the other stuff. Now, the second part of safety is not physical safety, but it's more intellectual and issues that are coming up today that many people became aware of during COVID. And so we have a lot of sort of alternative concepts being taught in American schools today, a lot of the public schools and some of the private schools too, where we have sort of an alternative gender ideology, different ideas on what families should look like. And we're really moving away from what we've always sort of accepted as normal. And unfortunately, it can be very confusing and very, very different than your values as a parent. And so keeping students safe from some of the ideologies and propaganda that's being taught today in American schools, I think is very, very important. And it's something to consider, not just safety physically, but also safety mentally and emotionally for your child. And then the second point is love and care. So this may sound obvious, but you want to make sure that you're taking your student, your child, to a school, if you're taking them to a school, where you know that those teachers and that administration loves your student, that they care about them, they know their name, they're concerned about them, they want to help them, they want what's best for them. That's it. That's deep in their heart. And as a Christian school, for us, we do a lot of professional development and training for our teachers to sort of stir that sort of mentality within them that you're here to serve, love, care, and take care of the next generation, young people. And it really shows when a school puts energy into making sure its teachers love the students, you as a parent will know. And it will also lift your child's lid of learning. In other words, they won't be capped based on insecurities and feeling unhappy and wondering if people care about them. Instead, it will help them rise to what their potential is. And so love and care for me as a parent, I have 3 children. I told you that already, but I want to make sure the mentors in their life care about them. They love them. They want their best. And so that's really, really important. The third one, which I think on this show, you guys talk about this a lot, high academic standards, right? You want to make sure the academic standards are high, that schools are working hard. Unfortunately, many people found out during COVID that these schools really aren't working as hard as they thought. And so looking at the program you choose and really saying, okay, are the academic standards high, or are they just meeting standards, or are they above standards and going above and beyond? That's a very important question for you to look at when you're deciding, do we go public school, do we go private school, do we go online, or do we do this at home? You want to think about the academic standards that are available to you with those different options. Then the next one is opportunity and personal growth. So having opportunity for your child is very important. And sometimes people can mistake this. So a lot of times when you look at who has the most programs, it's probably public school, right? Because they tend to be larger. The public school in my city, just down the street from me, there's a bunch, but the one down the street from me has 3,500 kids. So they have a lot of programs, right? But lots of programs and very large in size and really big buildings does not always mean opportunity, because you have to compete for those spots now. So if you're a football player, this is Texas, and there's 3,000 kids, you're competing with all of those football players to try to get a spot on the roster. If your child wants to be in student government and there's 3,000 kids, sometimes that can be more difficult to have the opportunity to learn and grow in leadership. And let's face it, some students are very standout, aggressive right from the beginning, and then others need to have opportunity so they can grow into that and become that. There's a lot inside of them that hasn't come out yet. And so sometimes a smaller environment, maybe with less programs, might be more beneficial for your child. You would need to sort of reflect on that yourself. But having opportunity for personal growth for your child to grow in leadership and exposure to different things, that's really important when you think about the schooling. The next one is real world application. So you don't want a test focused environment. You want a real world application environment. And I'll give you an example. If you ask me, well, what do your schools do for real world application? So we have something called Flex Projects for our K-8 program. Every quarter, our entire school, all of our K-8 students go through Flex Projects, and it stands for foundational learning experiences. So these are projects, and they're centered around, one quarter is centered around STEM, one quarter is centered around business and entrepreneurial leadership, and one quarter is centered around humanities and arts, and the other quarter is centered around spirituality and ministry, because we're a Christian school. But we have projects and presentations that what we deem as foundational learning experiences connected to the world. So we take the content and the kids will apply it and go through contests and presentations to have a real world experience within that content. Now, it doesn't always have to look like that, and different schools will do it differently. But I would say, as you're looking at schooling, you want to make sure real world learning application is there, because like Vicki said, having the foundation is key. And then that foundation somehow connecting to college and then connecting to life is really what we need to do as educators to make it real. And the last one I put on here is spiritual development. Now, I run Christian schools. It's a religious school. And I understand not everybody on the call will share that same value, and that's totally okay. I will say, however, though, that social emotional learning has become a really big topic in public schools and in America over the last 5 to 10 years. And for us, we believe that a lot of that is connected to spirituality. And so Christian schools have been doing social emotional spiritual development for forever. We've been doing it forever. It's not new for us. And so having some way for people to get healthy, and what we believe is that there's body, there's soul, where you have your mind and your will, but you also have your spirit. Taking care of all of those parts of your body makes you well-rounded and healthy and happy. And in today's society, we have a pandemic of depression, a pandemic of anxiety. And I believe it's a large reason for that is because schools in general don't take care of this. And so we highly value this. And we emphasize it and really spend a lot of time sort of developing this side of a student. So I would say top 6 things to look for as a parent. I would say these are them. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about some advantages and disadvantages of different models. So we live in an age where there's a lot of different opportunities for students, right? Vicki mentioned we've got public school, we've got private school, we've got online school, we've got homeschool, and we've got a lot of stuff in between. So there's a lot of opportunity, but how do you choose the right one for your child? Well, you're going to look at advantages and disadvantages of each. So let's talk about each one of these real quick. Well, public school, of course, it's government funded, so it's free for you, right? So that's a good thing. It's not expensive. It's literally costs us nothing. We already have to pay taxes. So that's where the money comes from, but it doesn't cost us anything out of pocket when we sign our kid up. And that's a big advantage. They're large. And so being large means you typically will have lots of programs. Okay, so that means they've got a lot of resources typically. Now it depends on where you live and the school district you're in. Some are great, some are not so good. All in all, public schools, their advantages are that they're government funded, and so they have a lot of programs. Now, when we go over to private schools, what are the advantages with private schools? Well, private schools, far and wide, data shows they are safer. They are safer. They are safer physically, spiritually, and emotionally. There's no arguing that. Across the board, private schools, they're smaller, they're more personal. Teachers have the opportunity to know parents, parents know the teachers, parental involvement is higher. So it's a smaller unit. So that's really one of the primary advantages of private school. And just speaking from a person who runs private schools, most parents are involved with their child's education, and that's a real advantage in a private scenario, is that most parents are involved. So the entire environment tends to get elevated because of that. Well, what about online? Online, what's the advantages with online are that it's flexible, right? You're not tied to a schedule. So in our online school, we have some students who are training we have a student in China who's training to play tennis in college and hopefully be a professional. She trains all day long. And so she takes our online courses because it's flexible for her, and that allows her to train and then have class when she wants. It's also accessible, right? And that means you can get it no matter where you are, as long as you have the internet. And that's important because maybe, I don't know where each of you live, but maybe as I go through these options, you're thinking in your head, well, we don't have a good private school close to us. It's not accessible. It's not even a choice. Well, online school is accessible anywhere. So that becomes a choice for families that's not limited by distance, and that's important. Also, online school has more opportunity to be personalized. We know every student is different. We know that every learner has different needs. Well, online school is much more flexible than in-person school, because when I do it in person, I've got groups of 25, 30 kids, and being personalized is very challenging in that environment. Online school can use technology to measure a standard that a student is struggling with and tutor them for specifically just for that standard. So it's a real advantage. And then last but not least is homeschool. And of course, homeschool is the most flexible of all of them, because when you're in online school, you still have a school telling you what to do. When you go homeschool, depends on the state, but in most states, homeschool is completely wide open. You can do whatever you want. And there's some benefits to that, but there's also some challenges with that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. You can completely customize your homeschool experience. So when you look at customization and specialization, you start over on the left. The public school is serving the masses. It's the least customizable. Then you go into private, you can actually choose the school that matches your values, right? Because now you can choose. In public, you can't choose. You have to go to your neighborhood school. But in private, you get to choose. Then you go online, you've got more flexibility, more options, because there's no bell schedule to worry about. And then you go homeschool, and it's complete open wide, whatever you want in that type of model. So really, this depends on a personal preference, which one is better. It really depends on what you want, but those are some advantages. So what are the disadvantages? Well, public school, me personally, I think the biggest disadvantage to public school is there's no real choice. You get assigned a school. So it's based on your address and your zip code. And only people that can afford to move into a new zip code, buy a new house, and live in a different area get to choose. Nobody else gets to choose, right? So if you can afford to buy a new house in a great school district, then you get to set yourself in that district. Otherwise, you go where you're assigned. They tend to have larger class sizes. That's a challenge. It's a challenge with a larger school setting. You're going to have more kids in a class, and research shows the bigger the class size, the lower the outcomes become. It's just research. You got a large student population. And then last, which is not well understood, but I want to make this clear, public schools are graded on percent meeting standards, right? So if you go on niche.com and you look at a score for a public school, it's going to be graded on the percent of students that are meeting standards. And some of that may or may not be relevant to you. My children don't struggle to meet the baseline standards. My children tend to perform up here a little bit higher. And so I'm primarily concerned what this part of the program is like. But when schools get ranked publicly and graded and funding comes, it's all based on the minimum standards. How many students are we elevating to here? And sometimes that's a good thing because we want students to succeed. But as parents looking in who really are engaged and care, and maybe whose students are college bound and maybe even some of the higher ranking colleges, you really want to figure out, are the programs quality and are they good? And so the grading system is not always easy to understand in that case. Okay, well, what about private? What are the disadvantages with private? Well, number one disadvantage is the cost. There's no government money, so it comes out of parents' pocket, and that can be challenging for families, right? Limited availability is another. Because private schools have to function as a sustainable business, they don't get money from the government. There's not a lot of them. So there's, in any given city, you're not going to have as many private schools as you will public schools, right? So there may or may not be one that you like around your house. And so that's the main challenge with private schools is the funding. What about online schools? What are their challenges? Well, the obvious one, socialization, talking to people, having relationships and interactions. So there's some things that online schools can do to help with this. Like we have live classes. Some online schools don't do that. They just totally plug into tech. And so socialization becomes a very challenging aspect if you go that route. So we don't do that. We have live classes virtually. We still do that. But anyway, you slice it, socialization is harder virtually than it is in person. It's more difficult. So you have to be more intentional. You have to try harder. You have to create new special programs to make sure this happens because it's such a vital part of education. Interaction with other students, teacher input. If an online school, as you think about an online school, if that's what you're interested in, you really want to think about how engaged are the teachers with my child, and is that what they need? If you have a very independent, very self-motivated child that just loves to consume knowledge, that may not be important. But for most children, it's going to be very important. So it's something to think about. The biggest disadvantage with homeschool, so let's switch to homeschool now, is that it relies on parents' expertise. So the parent has to become the expert now, and that can be challenging. You have to be, let's say your child is in the 5th grade, you have to know what standards should they be mastering, what level should they be at, what experiences should they have, and what sort of growth track should happen in order to create a home-based program that works for them. Now, there are systems out there that sort of do this for you that you can purchase. We have one. And so there are ways to overcome this, but that is a disadvantage and a challenge, is that when a parent takes this on, you really need to be able to ensure that your kid is learning everything they are supposed to. And that means you have to become the expert. You have to know the standards. You have to get the curriculum. You have to do daily lesson plans, and you have to teach and instruct, and then you have to measure learning effectively as a parent. That can be challenging. Not impossible, but it can be challenging. And then the other one is that they're not accredited. So accreditation in America is how we validate a school to other schools. So if you're going to college, you want to graduate from an accredited school in order to open up all colleges to you. Now, homeschooling, many universities will take homeschool students, many will. So I'm not saying there aren't colleges for you, but if you don't do an accredited program, there are some colleges that will frown upon that or look down on it or not want to accept the student because of it. That does happen. So it's just something to be aware of. And again, it depends on your child. If your child is wanting to go to, let's say, a private Christian school like Baylor or Biola, or there's many of them across America that are really good schools, they don't frown on homeschool at all. They're happy with it. But if you want to go to Harvard or Columbia, a school like that, they may be more selective and may not look, they may not like it as much. So it's just something to think about. All right. Okay, well, let's talk about one of the questions that Vicki wanted me to answer is, what about the cost? What's the cost of all these different types of programs? And so you can see it here. Well, public is free to attend. Of course, it's funded from our taxes, right? So we're all paying taxes to fund the public school. The government depends on the state, but the government pays somewhere between 12 and 30,000. 30 is like in New York, they pay about 30 grand a student. In Texas, where I live, the state pays 10, the Fed pays about 5. So you get about 15,000 for public education. So it just depends on where you live, but that's what it costs. It's free to you because you pay taxes and you live in the area. Now, private, really, there's a huge range when it comes to private. There are some inexpensive models, but they're few and far between, and they're very difficult for private schools to sustain. So it becomes very challenging. Typically, you're going to pay somewhere between 11,000 and 20,000. That's kind of a typical range. You can see in Texas, the average is 11,000. When you get into high school, it's typically more expensive than that. High school in Texas is usually around 16 to 18,000. And then if you live in California, I just grabbed those two areas because that's the two states I'm in, both of those states. It's the average there is about 16,700. So again, depends on where you live, but that's kind of roughly what it costs, right? Now, an online school can vary greatly, and there's free online schools, but they're public. So again, if you're trying to avoid some of the things with public school, the free ones may not change anything for you. They might, but they might not. But if you're looking at a private online school, it's going to range somewhere between 4,000 and 8,000. Just depends on the school. Now, there are some one-on-one models that are extremely expensive, but typically somewhere between 4,000 and 8,000, depending on how much live interaction the school does. The more live interaction the school provides, the higher the cost becomes because it just costs the school more to run it. And then with homeschool, you have to buy books and resources. And sometimes you need to pay to participate in statewide exams. It depends on where you live. And then many people will join a homeschool pod or a homeschool community. You don't have to, but many people do. So all of that costs a little bit of money, not very much. This is by far the cheapest model. But by the time you buy your books and all your resources, because remember, when you send kids to school, all the books are there. When you're at home, you got to buy it all and figure it all out. You're going to pay somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 a year. So that's kind of the costing between all of it. And if dollars and cents is what's driving your decision, homeschool is the most affordable. Online is next. Oh, I'm sorry, the most affordable is public. And then homeschool would be next, online, and then private would be up there at the top. And I see there's a question coming in. I think we're going to answer those at the end. So we'll get to them. If you have a question, feel free to put it in there so you don't forget. But we'll answer those at the end. Okay. So I'm going to, Vicki asked me to speak directly to some of the specifics on online and homeschooling. I think public school, most of you are probably very familiar with what that's like. Private school, probably also, it's a little bit more typical. I would say the biggest thing with private school is you want to find one that those 6 factors I told you, use those 6 factors. to measure it, and then find one that helps reflect your values, right? Because that's one of the points of private school. Online and homeschooling is what we would sort of put into an alternative sort of model, right? It's more flexible, time is different. Maybe they're at home, maybe they're, anyways. So let's talk a little bit about that and some of the unique factors. First, I want to talk about requirements to be effective in online and homeschooling, okay? And three big things. Planning and resources is number one. Okay, planning and resources. Now, if you're in an online school, this should be taken care of for you. But you just want to check, make sure it's accredited, find out what standards they use, find out if they do any nationally normed assessments, meaning like if you're in California, you guys do the STAR, that's a state test. In our school, we do NWEA MAP, that's a national norm test, because you can measure against the whole nation how your student is progressing, and that's important, right? They should give you lesson plans and an instruction. If you're looking at online schools, you want to decide how much instruction do I want? Do I want just grading and feedback? That tends to be cheaper. Or do I want live experiences for my child on a daily basis? Well, it may cost a little bit more if you do that. So when you do online school, you want to look at those two things. Online, typically, they will say they're either asynchronous, which means they don't meet live. It's just through email and you pace it yourself. Synchronous, we run a synchronous one. So our kids are on a traditional schedule, certain times a day, they hop on, their classes there, teachers are there, that sort of thing. So you can go either way with online school. But planning, resources, and input is a big decision maker when you look at these types of schooling models. How much input, planning, and resources do I need? When it comes to homeschool, remember, this is all on your plate, unless you choose to use a program that comes out of the box. So we have a homeschool program that many families buy from us, and it's K-5, and it has all of the resources that you would need, all of your lesson planning, all of your tests, all the projects, everything you would do every day, all of your assessments, and it has a recorded video where the teacher is teaching every day. So the parent is more following the system instead of having to figure all that out. So when you look at homeschooling, if you're thinking, do I want to homeschool? You really need to process that. Do I have the time, energy, and ability to plan an entire year of school, or do I want to buy a system that has all that done for me? Okay. Now, another question was, what about technology required? Well, if you're in an online school today, I mean, technology is such a big part of our lives. It's not that difficult to be equipped and ready. We usually recommend that you use a laptop, but most online schools can be accessed with mobile devices too. It's just not as practical, but either one works. As long as you have a laptop bought in the last 5 years, you should be fine. Or a mobile device bought in the last 5 years, you should be fine. And in most homes, this is very normal. Then the other thing you need is web access. So have to make sure you have access to the web, because that's where the school comes from. With homeschool, there's no technology required. However, if you're going to do homeschool, you really should consider making sure technology is part of the program. And the reason is because just like we're doing this now, our lives are so embedded in technology, students need to interact with technology to fulfill their learning so that they can move into a 21st century world and not be a foreigner. And that's really important. So it's not required for homeschool, but I suggest that you make sure it's implemented. If you do a homeschool program, make sure there is regular use of technology to access resource, create presentations, all of that good stuff that should be happening in a good school program. And then the last one is structure and oversight. And this kind of goes back to, you need clear structure. You need clear structure. If you choose online school, you'll have sort of a range of structure and oversight you can choose. You can choose asynchronous, where you have 18 weeks to finish the lessons, and you have a teacher that will answer your questions via email. That's the most hands-off model. The more hands-on model is where they have times of day that they get online, they have a teacher they meet with, that teacher tutors them, They email back and forth. If the kid doesn't turn something in, the teacher calls you. So the teacher's still very involved. They're just not in a building. So structure and oversight levels are a big thing you want to decide. It really depends on how much time you have to put into it and how independent your child is. Those are two main factors when deciding that. And when it comes to homeschooling, I would say this. When people say I'm thinking about homeschooling, what do you think? We tend to see two types of homeschool families. The first one, it completely works. And the reason is because you have a homeschool mom who she could run a school by herself. She could probably run the US military. She's like on it. She's got all these opinions. She's got everything that she wants. She knows exactly what's happening, and she's doing lesson plans. And it's a machine in the house. That works. Then we have another one where it's really loose and people don't really know what's happening. They don't have clear set structure, not times. And unfortunately, you'll see students go through a week, 2 weeks, and they're not learning anything. They're not progressing. And you think if you stack that 1 or 2 or 3 years, your child, it's inevitable they're going to get behind. And so structure and oversight, how much you can bear, how much you can provide, and being realistic with it as a parent is very, very important when you're thinking about homeschooling. So structure and oversight, those are 3 big factors with the homeschooling. Then when you're doing either homeschool or online, you want to think about extracurricular. Okay. Now, before I go through these, let me say this. Sometimes people think extracurricular and they just think about what the school does. Now, obviously, in a public school, there's going to be more extracurricular opportunities than there ever will be in an online school or in a homeschool, because they're not there. You've got to go find them, right? But remember, flexibility is one of the key factors for these programs. So what that means is your child will now have the number one resource that we have as humans in abundance to them, and that resource is time. So you can completely control their time now and decide when they plug into those activities. So simple example, we have, I told you about the student in China that does tennis. We also have a group of students that are training gymnasts. You know, they want to go to Stanford and they want to be gymnastics stars. That's their dream. And so they're in gym, and these are American students, but they're in gym from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. And so at 2 to 6, they do online school with us. So time becomes an opportunity to plug in to more extracurricular, but you need to go find them, the ones that are appropriate for your students. So the schools are going to offer less, but they're going to give you more time. And so that can be a real advantage. Well, one extracurricular opportunity, sports, clubs, church activities. Those are big extracurricular socialization opportunities for students. Even if they don't really like sports, still they can go be a part of it, right? Church is another great one where it's just healthy fun for kids to get to know each other. The second one is tutoring and learning advancement centers. So think about Harvard Square, phenomenal college and career planning group. They have really robust programs. Well, sometimes adding that to a full load at a very intensive school can be overwhelming. Not for every student, but sometimes it can be challenging. Well, now you can tailor the education to take more advantage of what they offer and to plug in more to their programs to really get the full benefit of what they have to offer. And your schooling can come sort of in a more flexible nature. So tutoring and learning and advancement centers have wonderful extracurricular opportunities that you can plug into. And then think about internships and service and volunteer programs. Well, there's a lot of them out there, but many students can't do them because they're at school all day. And then when they get out of school, it's hard for a parent to get here and then take them over there, especially if you live somewhere like Southern California. You're restricted by how far you can drive because traffic's so bad, right? So having time can allow you to design more unique experiences for your student as long as you're intentional about it. And the last one is the college and career planning programs. I just mentioned that, but like what Harvard Square offers, there's a lot of opportunity for extracurricular through their types of programs that they do and getting plugged into some of their things. So I would say extracurricular opportunities, if you're going to choose this type of schooling, there are many that are available to you. However, you have to be more intentional with them, because there's not going to be a school counselor forcing the kid to go do something. So you'll want to be more intentional and make sure you get your kid involved in them. But there's lots of opportunity for it. Okay. When we think about school choice and college application, some of the things that we should consider. So we've talked about the schooling options, but a couple of things to make note of, because I know many of you care a lot about college, or else you wouldn't be on this call and you wouldn't be engaged with this wonderful group of schools called Harvard Square and Vicky and their group. So things to think about if you decide to go this route. One, options create opportunity, right? And everybody knows you need to stand out on your college app. You have to stand out. You have to be unique. So as you look at these options, there's more opportunity for you, but you have to go utilize that opportunity. So if you enroll in an online school and you have more flexible time, you really need to be intentional about making every effort to go do some of the other things that I just mentioned. Or if you do homeschool, you really need to make sure your student has some really unique experiences that other kids that are locked in school can't have, so that they can prepare themselves for the real world and bolster their portfolio prior to applying for college. Okay. One more consideration here, it says what to consider when choosing a program. Homeschool may impact college access opportunities. I already mentioned that. Now, of course, K-8, it's not going to, because colleges only look at 9, 10, 11, 12. They look at a transcript from 9, 10, 11, 12. So if you're doing homeschool unaccredited K-8, and then you switch to an accredited program, 9, 10, 11, 12, well, no big deal. The college is not going to look at your K-8. But if you decide to do homeschool in high school and don't have an accredited stamp on it, you still will have colleges you can go to, but it may be more limited. So it's something to consider. So as you look at any program, you need to ask, are you accredited? Okay. And make sure they are. Okay. The same, and then at the last, I just said that the same entrance requirement exists for all students. So how can your students stand out and be unique? Well, alternative learning programs give them the opportunity to be unique. However, I would say if you just do the standard and just do school and graduate, it's not going to be unique. You need some of those other opportunities embedded into your program for your student. You need to get them involved with what Harvard Square does. You need to get them involved in internships. You need to get them involved in some sort of proactive sort of learning experience that's very unique, a summer program where they go and serve a less advantaged community, or whatever it might look like, building a club in the community where other students come to and they lead it. It doesn't have to be school sponsored. In fact, many times when it's not school sponsored, it can be even more meaningful because it shows initiative, and colleges really, really like that. So as you look at this alternative schooling, it's not to say that these are worse choices for college acceptance. They're not. But as you look at them, you want to consider these things and make sure you're intentional if your student is college bound. So if their next step is college before their career, be intentional with their schooling. Don't just pull them out of public school and then, what now? You want to be intentional with these decisions to make sure that they get the most out of their opportunities. Okay. I wanted to say a couple of things about religious private schools, just because that's what we run. That's what I run. It's important to me because I obviously believe in this religion, right? I am a Christian. And so for my family, these are values that we adhere to. A couple things to know. Religious private schools typically have a high level of love and mission associated with the school. So for us, because we believe in God and we believe that he loves people, and we believe that he calls us to love people as well, it creates a very high level of love and mission associated with the school. So as a parent, like I said earlier, that's really important. And it will be something that if you do choose a religious private school, that you'll enjoy, or you should enjoy. That should be a typical trait at a Christian school. Okay. I did mention this prior as well, but our approach to SEL, that's social emotional learning, we approach SEL comprehensively, and we have been doing it for decades. So it's not really new programs that we're bringing in. We have been talking about spirituality, prayer, and managing your emotions, character. Those are things that are embedded into what religious schools already do. And so I think it's a little bit more mature in the religious private school than it is on the outside. And then I do want to say that they will typically require an extra course, a Bible course. Usually they require that, almost always. I think it's pretty rare that they don't require it. So, however, you don't have to believe the religion. That's not always a requirement. Now, let me back up from that. Some schools will require it where they won't accept the student, right? But many schools do not require it. Like our school, you don't have to be a Christian. You need to at least agree that we are, and that's our perspective, and you're okay with us talking about it, right? And talking to you about it. But we also respect you as an individual, and we invite dialogue, and it's an open conversation. And so they don't always require you to become part of the religion. In fact, most do not. Some might prior to acceptance, but for most of them, you don't have to. But so if you're looking at a religious private school, these are things to be aware of and just think about. I will say a lot of families that maybe aren't religious are leaving public schools because they're worried about some of the ideologies that are being taught in the schools today. A lot of non-religious private schools, not all of them, but a lot of non-religious private schools are teaching those same things. So you need to, if that's what you're trying to get away from, you really need to check and see and make sure that you're protecting your child from the things you're wanting to protect them from. But this is some unique aspects of a religious private school that you would experience if you chose to do that. Okay, that's a lot of talking. I've got just 1 minute. I want to talk about school choice in America, just broad. So just the policy real quick, real fast, just for those who may not be as aware of what it is. School choice is about giving options for parents and students with their child's education. So basically we can take state money and have it follow the child instead of follow the school. So if your child, my daughter's name is Mackenzie, if the school down the street from me doesn't work for her, I can take her state funds and send her to a private school or homeschool or online school that's better for her. That's basically what school choice is saying, is that, hey, look, we shouldn't limit parent choice based on zip code. We should allow parents to choose what's best. Okay, that's the basics of the school choice movement. Okay, and some states will allow all or some state funding to follow the student instead of following the institution. A basic part of this is that parents can choose what's best for their child instead of having it being chosen for them. Private institutions decrease the burden on public institutions to educate. So Arizona is a big school choice state. It's universal there, meaning anyone can apply for it. And the government has come out and said that this is actually lowering the burden on us to educate, because the private schools now are helping at a lower cost because they don't give all the money to the private schools. They only give some of the state funding to the private schools, and more people are choosing that. So now they have more money going into their public schools. So again, not saying it's super easy like that and it's always correct, but in many cases it can lower the burden on the public school. Competition is established, driving long-term improvement and innovation. So public schools don't have competition because everybody's assigned to their school. And so by offering school choice, students could leave. That creates competition, which automatically generates innovation and higher standards. That's the nature of capitalism and what we believe as a country. And so school choice sort of believes that could apply to schools too. And then roughly there's 28 states that offer some funding for some students, and only 10 states currently have universal programs, meaning everybody has access to it. So school choice is not real common, but it's becoming more common, and hopefully in the future it'll become even more common. And this to me is important. 71.3% of Americans support school choice, and we're in a democracy. You know, most people support it. I would hope that we see our governments moving more towards it. Now, I'm in Texas and I'm in California. Neither state has funding for private schooling or school choice funding. So I hope both states get it, but neither one does today. So that's where we're at with school choice. Okay. Last slide. As I said at the beginning, I'm a superintendent of 2 school brands. One is called Southlands Christian. It's a local brand in California, in Southern California. We'd love to have you visit. We have preschool. We also have TK to 12. We have overseas campuses in Asia. We run summer camps that are short-term and fun. We take kids to Disneyland and all kinds of stuff. It's a lot of fun. So if you're in Southern California, we'd love to have you for summer camp. We also have an online school. And then we've got Pathway, which is our K to 12 virtual school. We also do hybrid programs with church partners and other Christian schools, where they do in-person some days and virtual other days. And then we have a homeschool offering too. So that's who we are. If you want to learn more about us, you can scan those QR codes. So that's it for me, Vicki. I think we've got some questions.
Oh, yeah, the questions they were asking was about the seminars tomorrow. So they want to know the location. Yeah, I already answered that. Yeah, good job. So, you know, yeah, 我觉得家长你们应该从这个 Brandon 的分享里头知道了一些讯息。如果你们有任何的问题，还是不是很清楚的，可以打在 Q&A 的 box， 打中文也可以，英文也可以，我会解释给 Brandon 听好。其实 Brandon 的中文讲得非常好，但是我觉得他可能不好意思哈，所以呢，其实
没有，我会紧张。如果我在大家面前，我会紧张啊。
对，而且他的口音是台湾口音，所以我觉得这是真的是蛮有意思的哈。那我自己有一个问题，就是其实我有2个问题想要跟 Brandon 这个讨论哈。首先第一个就是我觉得很有意思，就是你 mention 就是说 Christian school 你们有很多的就是 love and care for the students。我觉得这真的是一个很有意思的事情，因为我才从California 搬到 Texas 1年多哈，我觉得 Texas 的人他们真的对一般的人都有很多的 love and care， 因为他们是 Christian， 因为他们觉得大家都是 brothers and sisters， 所以我们都要就是说我们我希望你快乐，就是我希望你好，所以他们很多的 love and care 给别人。我觉得这真的是我自己的感受，我觉得在 Texas 的人是非常 friendly， 然后非常的这个就是很 nice 啦，很 nice 啦，应该这么说。对，所以我不知道 Brandon 你有没有这样的感觉，因为你也是从 California 搬到 Texas。
对，我先说德州有一种那个水里面有一种病啊，当你搬到德州来，你喝2口，你就会觉得德州是世界最好的地方啊。所以 Vicky 没有开玩笑，但是对啊，是啊，真的是这样子，就说因为像我说的，基督教会教导你说神爱每一个人，那每一个人是有价值的。那当然不是完美，所以我们不是每一次我们都活出这个价值观，但是说基本上这是价值观存在。那我们相信的时候，我们就会比较注重人，也会比较想要去爱人、帮助人。然后在学校是特别的，我觉得是蛮重要的，是你小孩子的 mentor， 就你小孩子的老师是真正的从心里面去爱他们，
是的，
想帮助他们，想看他们成功啊！你对你自己的小孩会怎么做？那你也想要那个老师也对你的小孩子也是这样子做，所以我会觉得对，没有错。
对，我觉得真的，因为像我讲一个 example。 example，就是我曾经有过一个学生，他当然是读 public school，他跟我说，他早上有一天早一点去学校，然后他有一个 question，就是homework 的 question，然后他就看到老师刚好走进来，他就想要问那个老师，结果那个老师说，就是说工会就是 labor union 规定说我们几点到几点上班，那个就是 between 那个 hour 我们 answer question，那就是说不是那个 hour 我就不愿意回答你的问题就对了呀呀，我就觉得这个就是真的就还对小孩子来说，我觉得是蛮伤害的啦。
是啊，
对
对啊，当然，如果你觉得老师不喜欢你，你就不会主动的去跟他说话，问他任何
是，
的问题，还是你心里面有在想什么，你也不会跟他分享。那我
对，
们我们当上家长，我们听到这个就会觉得很难过，我不
难过，
要我的孩
对。
子有这种情况，所以这是很重要，非常重要。
是是，我觉得真的是呀。然后第二个事情呢，我想，因为 Brandon 你之前在 California 做这个校长做了很久，然后
嗯，
你搬去这个 Texas，那你觉得这两个地方的这个 education 有什么不一样吗？
呃，一有啊，我觉得就说你说就是整州的 education 的情况吗？
嗯哼，对，就是它的 environment，
我觉得特别现在不只是加州，但是加州是比较严重一点。加州州政府开始设一些就你要教很多新的东西。我要很小心的说，就说这些东西是我们一般的人，我们不喜欢，我们觉得学校不应该在讨论
对
这些，
对对对
我们觉
对
得这是课后的课外的东西，你不要拉到学校里面来谈。我们家长一般是这样子想，但是他们是很努力要去谈这些啊，所以
对，很
加州是
努力，真的是很努力呀
对很努力要
呀。
去做，所以但是说德州也有一些地方也开始这样子做，所
对，
以
也是有，yes。可是我觉得哈，家长的力量很重要，因为在德
对
州，他们不大敢那么努力的推，因为
对对是，
他们知道家长会很生气，因
嗯
为家长是，尤其是德州人，他们是很直，所以如果你真的 mess up 他的小孩什么要变性还是什么，德州的家长对他们不会那个的呀，
，yeah yeah，
对他
所以
们会很生气呀。
然后两个地方也有一个比较难去对面的，就是说，因为移民的人很多嘛，所以
对对对。
会讲英文的人很多不太会讲，所以你进去 public school，也是他们要去克服的。Dallas 比较没有这个问题，没有那么严重，
对
但是德州南部是非常严重，那整个加州都有嘛，
对对对，
所以是两个比较难的情况，他们要去面对的。
是的，Dallas 你不讲英文是没有办法的，对，就
Yeah.
是没有那个，就是比较没有那个移民啦，对，所以我们现在有一个问题就是 best places in Texas to move in，他问我们说 Texas 要 move in 去哪里哈，我们就变成这个可以呀，我们也可以回答一下这样的问题，Is Rice University progressive? Yeah, do you know? 嗯
Yeah, it is to some degree. I mean,
，Yeah。
it's probably not as bad, but yeah, to some degree it is.
Yes，对，其实还是有啦，因为其实据我所知，就算是有一些部分的是 Christian 的 college，它
Yeah,
也是有一点点这样子的，就是比如说 LGBTQ club 啊这些，它也是
是
有的。对对对，因为这是呀，现在是整个情形，我觉得主要还是要看那整个的，就是说他的 student body 的那个，对，他是怎么样的一个观点，然后就是 best places to move in 哈。我是跟你们讲，Dallas 是不可以不讲英文，不讲英文来 Dallas 是比较难。那如
嗯，
果说你要就是说可以不要讲英文，活得很开心的话，就是可能 Houston。可是 Houston 就是吃的啊，什么也都很多，什么中国菜什么，可是那边就是天气是很潮湿。对，
对
这一点，对，我跟 Brandon 都很同意，我们两个都不能接受。对，是很
对。
潮湿，对，像 A 小。
Dallas 天气，如果你是从加州搬过来，Dallas 会比较好受一点，因
比较好
为
说，对，其实 Dallas 蛮好的，对。然后第二个问题是，Does a pathway online school offer summer high school courses accredited for college? Yes, that's a good question. Yeah.
Are our courses accredited for
Yeah,
college?
your courses.
Yeah, the schools are online. The homeschool program that you could just purchase and run by yourself is not, because parents will issue their own grades. But our online school is, because we have teachers that will work with your student and issue the grades for you.
Right，我来解释一下，就是说他们这个学校，他们的 online 学校有两个 system，一个 system 是 online school 是有老师的，那个是有accredited，然后大学也会承认。比如说你拿他的这个 AP 课，那也是大学会承认，然后你也可以去就是说申请大学学分 later on，如果你有考那个 AP 考试。可是他们的另外一个 system，那叫什么 homeschool 吗？homeschool 那个是你自己学，然后就是你的 parents 帮你打分，所以那个是没有老师的，所以那个是没有 accredited。好，那个还是可以申请大学，但是那个它不是 accredited，因为美国本来就是有这个 homeschooling，很久以来都有，就是 homeschooling，就是你自己在家自己教自己的小孩，然后你去一般 correct me if I'm wrong，就是你去学区，请学区给你那个测试，看你有没有过那个，就是 high school graduate，对不对？就是
也要看每一个州都不一样，所以有的要叫你考试，像德州没有，你不用考试，你什么都没有。
对
那当然，你还有，如果你有考 ACT、SAT，还是有去考，有的会去考记忆力，但是大部分我不会去考记忆力。但是有很多方式，你可以给大学看你的程度在哪里。但是如果
对对。
你这些都没有去做，然后ACT、SAT 也是选择性的，在有的大学，那个你也不考，会比较难一点。
对，就是你没有任何的东西 prove 你的程度嘛，因为
Yeah，
大学它就是要知道说你程度有没有。那你如果说是 homeschooling 的话，你就要去考一些什么考试来让他看到，就是 standardized 的标准化的测试，所以他可以就是那个就是可以看看你的程度够不够。Yes，OK，好，这个他说 Vicky's example about the teachers union is so true 。Yeah，当然是真的啊，我不会乱编啊。Yeah, it is true. Yeah, I heard Rice is a progressive. Yeah，我其实也听说，因为 Rice 他刚刚换校长，然后他现在新的校长是那个就是 African American，是那个非洲裔，然后呀，他们有一些就是新的 policy。呀，我也有听说。Yes，好。How many weeks is a summer course at the Pathway？你
It's
看得到吗？
我看得到，所以我们会开八个礼拜，然后你可以自己选你的进度是多快，
哦，你可以
所以
自己选你自己的进度。
暑假我们没有 live 这样子，
没有，
我们没有
不是，
live，
OK，就是看
暑假没有，
recording 是吗？
因为我们每次暑假是这个学生要这个，那个学生要那个，我们就没有 group，
Right，
所以我们
哦
就让你自己安排你怎么上。
哦，就是看 video 学这样子是吗？
我们也有老师，但是我们没有像一般我们在上课，我们就是礼拜一几点你来上课，大家一起来上。但是暑
嗯嗯，
假我们没有这样子做，因为学生没有很多，所以我们就是给你 asynchronous。那你还可以约老师，你可以跟老师谈话。
对对对。
Yeah.
呀，我在这里要特别讲一下，其实他们的这个实际的学校就是 Southland 啊，Southern Christian 在那个就是洛杉矶，我跟他们其实是很久的朋友，不算是
嗯
合作，但是算是朋友。就是我们学生很多从 Southland 来，然后我们有的时候需要去跟他们商量一下学生的这个class selection，就是选课的问题。我觉得 Southland 非常 sincere，然后他们真的很在乎学生的这个 benefit。然后像有一些就是比较难商量，他就说哦 no 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 no。可是我觉得 Southland 他不是说 flexible，他是会看学生真的需要什么，然后真的会 try to accommodate，就是说学生的需要跟学生最好的 benefit。所以我这一点我真的是要讲，因为我 work with a lot of schools。 我觉得 Southern Christian 这一点是做得非常好，所以他们真的是很在乎他们的学生。所以其实我们做他们的学生，很多进很好的大学的，也是就是比较有 room 去做，因为他们愿意配合，所以我觉得这一点是很好。甚至一些就是 extracurricular activities，他们也都会那个帮助学生去，就是参加像一些 competition 那些 club 啊，像什么 tech talk 啊那些，他们都会做。我觉得这一点是真的是非常好的，所以我也是很喜欢这个学校，才会请他的校长来跟你们讲哈。那我觉得说，这当然是你们自己的一个选择。我的平台就是 provide 很多很多的 education information，所以你们可以自己做决定。好，我没有就是说跟你们讲哪个比较好，哪一个就是 is the best for you。我觉得你自己才知道什么是最好的，对你的小孩，对你的家庭来说。但是呢，我就是 provide 我觉得很好的一些 resource 给你们呀，所以就是你们可以自己判断呀。所以我今天很谢谢 Brandon 来跟我们做这个 presentation。对，那如果说你们有什么这方面更进一步的问题想要了解，可以跟他们联络哈。那其实你跟 Brandon in person 讲中文是没有问题的，他可以回答的很好，所以呀，所以 don't worry，如果